Hey guys, so Autism Awareness Month, April. Now in some places on the internet you might see information about it's a week or a day in April. No one seems to know, everyone seems to have a different info about it. We all know it's in April, but we're not sure whether it's a month, a day, a week. You know, I think it might be to do with the part of the world you're from. I don't know. It's confusing. But yeah, I'm going to try and clear up some of the myths and talk about some of the myths around autism. Maybe share a bit of my experience of autism. Yeah, and try and raise a little bit of awareness. So, stereotypes and myths. Let's start with gender, the genderization of autism. Now, it was originally thought that autism only affected boys. And then in recent years, they found out, well, actually, no, there are some girls that are presenting with autistic traits. So it must affect girls as well. So there must be a boy's autism and a girl's autism. Not true at all. There shouldn't be a genderization in autism, because I myself present as female. I don't identify as female, but I present as female to medical professionals. But my autism doesn't present as the female archetype of autism. I present as more on the male side. So that's where I'm having trouble as well getting diagnosed. And yeah, I've met a lot of autistic people, and there's autistic males who fit the female archetype, autistic females that fit the male, and vice versa. Some that don't fit either, some that are in the grey area in the middle of them, you know, so it's a spectrum. And I think we need to definitely get rid of that, because that is one thing that is hanging up, getting people hung up with the diagnosis thing and being misdiagnosed or undiagnosed, is the fact that they don't fit in with these stereotypes that the doctors and stuff are using. So yeah, another stereotype is age. Now, it was originally thought that autism only affected children, young children, and these children will eventually grow out of autism, and when they get older they are no longer autistic. When they are adults, they are no longer autistic. That's what originally was believed, and is still believed actually in some circumstances today. And it's completely untrue. Your children do not grow out of autism. An adult with autism, an autistic child who grows into an adult, is an autistic adult. They do not grow out of the autistic traits. What does happen, however, in a lot of cases, is as a child grows into teenhood and adulthood, along the way they may learn coping mechanisms. So ways of coping with the world around them and stuff. And some of those coping mechanisms are masking, mimicking, and I do that a lot. I mask and mimic, so to fit in more with the world around me, with the humans, and with society, I will mask and mimic. So mimicking, I do it a lot. I mimic my peers. So my non-autistic peers, I will copy them. So their body language, their facial expressions, when in a social situation with them, how they react, I watch and I learn from that, and I act in that way as well. So if they cross their arms, I cross their arms. If they laugh at a joke I didn't get, I will laugh as well, even though I didn't get it and I don't understand it. Stuff like that, you know. So, and masking is where I've learned to hide some of my autistic traits and disabilities, because society sees it as not normal, and I've been bullied a lot because of it. So I mask to hide it so that I don't get bullied. There's loads of different reasons for masking, but when you mask, it can be a good thing sometimes. Like with me, it's helped protect me a little from bullying, but then it hasn't helped with my mental health, because I used the mask so much that I became the mask, if that makes sense. And that caused a lot of mental health issues. But yeah, so aging out, we don't age out, we develop coping mechanisms. What other myths are there? Autistic people don't get sarcasm. We do. We get sarcasm. A lot of us do. It has to be like, I know I do. I know there are some autistic people that don't get sarcasm, but I know I do. Not all the time. Sometimes I fail with that miserably, but it has to be very obvious that it's sarcasm for me to understand it. If it's subtle sarcasm, it'll go right over my head and I'll completely miss it. Also, dishing out sarcasm, I'm quite good at dishing that out, but I struggle with my tone of voice. That's one thing we struggle with communication-wise, is the tone of voice. So with my tone, when I'm being sarcastic, sometimes it's not a sarcastic tone that I use, and I don't realise that. And as you can imagine, that causes a lot of offence sometimes and a lot of problems. So yeah, sarcasm. Some of us do get sarcasm. Some of us don't. Sometimes it has to be very obvious. We struggle with tone of voice, body language, facial expression sometimes as well. So that also adds into the fact that we struggle to read sarcasm and jokes. You know, so like, I don't know, if someone's being sarcastic in a really deadpan way, I won't get it. They have to be very animated and obvious to sarcasm. But yeah, so what other myths? There's one, empathy. Autistic people do not have empathy. That is a lie, that's a myth. We do. If anything, we have too much empathy, but we don't know how to regulate it or show it or use it, if that makes sense. And sometimes we struggle to understand what we are feeling, but we feel it a lot more than you know. We may not show it, but we feel it, definitely. So that's one myth. that's totally wrong. As well, the way we regulate our emotions, we do that with stims, stimming. Now, I stim a lot. That can also come into the communication aspect of autism. Learning to read the stims and what stims mean, that can help you to connect with an autistic person and communicate with them and understand them. So, for instance, me, when I'm overly happy and excited about something, I will hand flap or bounce up and down or do strange little dances. When I'm happy about something or excited, that's the stim I use. The stims I use. Apparently I food stim. My partner has told me that I food stim. When I eat food, if I really enjoy it, like, I don't know, chocolate cake or sushi, if I'm eating it and I really enjoy it, I will do a funny little dance or something, apparently. Sometimes I don't even realise I'm doing these stims. They just happen. But then there are bad stims as well. So where we're not able to regulate our empathy, our emotions, if we don't have an outlet for that, the outlet is the stims. If we don't stim to let that out, it gets internalised and balled up. Then that can turn into bad things like mental health issues, bad stims like self-harm. Yes, self-harm is a stim. So with me, I have a few bad stims, self-harm stims. I skin pick till all my skin is gone and I bleed, like around my fingers and stuff, which is why I have really bad fingernails. I don't know if you can see, but bits of dead skin around my thumb there. Like, yeah. I also scratch, mostly on my legs. I will scratch and scratch and scratch till I bleed, and then I'll keep scratching. I've got to the point where I've got down to the muscle and carried on. And then, of course, when I stop, my fingernails are covered in blood because I've just been scratching a bloody wound the whole time. And that's usually when I'm overly stressed out. Now I try and channel that stim and channel that. Instead of doing the scratching, I try and do the rocking instead, because that is a more safer, healthier stim. Or I try and channel it into things like fidget toys, fidget spinners, and stuff like that. I have fidget spinners, infinity cubes, tangle toys, tangle wiggle toy things, fidget flip chains, all sorts. I have a fidget cube somewhere, I don't know where that's gone, but yeah, I do have like a fidget cube as well. Excuse me, my hat. That label, it keeps moving around, my hat does, and that label ends up above my eye and I can feel it there, and it's sensory input, you know. So so yeah, stims, being able to regulate our emotions with stims is important. Sensory input and sensory overload, that's one thing to learn about autism. Like the tag issue, on this hat. Usually I would cut off tags on my clothes, especially like the tags inside your t-shirt or your trousers, you know, that have the washing directions or the size or whatever. I usually cut those off because sometimes they feel really itchy and prickly. It's like I've got a cactus down the top or something, you know. So I cut those off usually. Sensory input as well can be sound, too much sound, too many people talking at once. It's too much for me. Different light, sensitive to light. And when there's too much of sensory input, my brain can go and shut down, and I struggle to function. And yeah, so I try not to get into those situations. I use things like Vibes, the Vibes earplugs, high fidelity earplugs. They're very good. I use them usually when I go to music venues, when I'm going to do poetry, my spoken word poetry events and stuff. I try to use those if I know it's gonna be a very noisy venue, or if I'm just out and about doing shopping in the town centre. I will wear them because noise of people shopping is too much. And then of course you got the noise of the traffic, you know, noise of the tills beeping and whatever, noise of trolleys, you know, all sorts of noises going on in a town centre. Sometimes it's too much for me to deal with. So yeah, and it can cause a meltdown. And there we go, here's another myth. A meltdown is a tantrum. Nope, meltdowns and tantrums are two different things. An autistic meltdown is because the autistic person is having trouble regulating themselves, their emotions. They're having trouble regulating any sensory input. And it's a bit like with your computer. If you tell your computer to do too many things at once, it usually freezes or crashes, or you'll get that blue screen of death. So where your computer's gone, no, too much, shut down time. You know, it's the same with a person with autism. If there's too much going on, they cannot regulate it all. So their body goes into mode. And sometimes that can present like a tantrum, but it's not. Now, a normal tantrum, there is usually a goal at the end of it, you know? Like, for instance, your child asks you if they can have some ice cream and you say no, because it's going to ruin their appetite for dinner or something. And that child then throws a tantrum, starts screaming, stamping their feet, you know, and they will do that until they get their own way, until you give in and say, yes, here you go, here's your ice cream. Then they'll stop that tantrum, you know, or they'll carry on until they get bored or distracted by something else. An autistic person, when they're in that meltdown mode, there's no goal at the end of it. They will not stop when you offer them ice cream or whatever. They won't get distracted by something else. They won't get bored. They will keep going until they burn out, until they get too tired to carry on. or until someone intervenes and helps them regulate everything that is going on. So usually that would be taking the autistic person out of the situation that has caused the meltdown. So going away to a quiet room or a quiet area where they can calm down and start to regulate themselves. So yeah, I suffer occasionally from meltdowns. They can manifest differently for everyone. Me, I get extremely tired and fatigued. I'll get headaches. Yeah, I think when I was younger, it did used to present, when I was a kid, it did used to present as a tantrum, but as I've got older, I've learnt coping mechanisms. So it presents differently now that I'm an adult. Yeah, so what else? Communication with autistic people. There's loads of different ways autistic people communicate. For instance, echolalia. Now, echolalia is where the person will mimic sounds they have heard in video games, TV shows, movies, even friends and family members around them. They will mimic sounds from that. I use echolalia occasionally. But yeah, there are some autistic people who communicate entirely using echolalia. For instance, there's a guy who communicates entirely using sounds from Disney movies. You know, so also the stims are a type of communication. I've covered that already. And sign language. That means thank you. I don't know much proper sign language. I know some very crude sign language, enough to get me by in a social situation when I've gone mute. Drink. That's my sign for drink. Me and my partner, when we're out and about, I use sign language with him a lot when we're out and about, because I struggle to talk. But yeah, so there's many different ways we can communicate. So when you see a person using stims, sign language, or making noises when you're walking past someone and they're making silly noises, don't just think, oh, they're making silly noises. They're not. They're probably communicating. You know, that's their way of communicating. And I know a lot of autistic people get bullied for the way they're communicating. I know I have been. I've been bullied for the way I communicate. So I stopped communicating. And we don't want that. We don't want people to stop communicating because they feel that they're not wanted, you know? Because that's what it feels like. It feels like anything you have to say is irrelevant because you're not saying it in the way society wants you to say it, you know? So, like, yeah. I think that's it for the myths and stereotypes that I can think of for the moment. There's probably a lot more, and you could probably learn more about those by using the hashtag #ActuallyAutistic on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that sort of stuff. Even on YouTube, type in Actually Autistic. You will find a lot of information, videos, pictures, a lot of posts and blogs and vlogs about autism made by autistic people. And that is the best way to learn, I think, about autism. So yeah, my own story though, I don't want to go too much into it because how long's the video now? 25 minutes, I think. Yeah, so I don't want to go too much into it because I will end up with a massively long video. But yeah, my own autistic story. I'm not officially diagnosed yet. I'm still working through that process. I have had it confirmed that I am autistic though by a therapist, private therapist who specialises in autism. I had to pay to go private to get the consultation with her. It cost me something like £300. And if I want to go further and get the assessment, and the full diagnosis, it's going to cost a couple of grand, which I'm currently saving up for. Trying to get an assessment and diagnosis on the NHS, I think I've said already, is near impossible. It's like banging your head against a brick wall. I've been trying for years and got nowhere. Keep getting told by doctors I speak to in the NHS that what is the point in diagnosing you now? You're an adult, you should have grown out of autism. Again, outdated criteria, myths, stereotypes, that's what's being used. No wonder why a lot of people are going undiagnosed or misdiagnosed. So yeah, but learning that I'm actually, that what I have is autism, that I am autistic, learning that for sure has opened up a lot of doors for me and has helped me a lot. I feel like I've learned a lot and I've figured out who I am and I've begun to unmask. And I'm more comfortable with myself and I understand myself more. It's had a really good impact on me actually having it confirmed by a professional who specialises in diagnosing autism, that I am autistic. It's had a massively good impact on me. So much positivity from it. So I now know that my stims are not weird, that I can stim in public as much as I want and screw anyone who doesn't like it. To tell the truth though, I still get a little bit nervous about stimming in public, but I'm trying to correct that. Doing the open mic poetry stuff, the spoken word poetry stuff, that is, I started doing that because I wanted to combat my social anxiety, and it's been really difficult, and sometimes I still get really anxious up on stage. Every time I read a poem in front of other human beings, I get anxious. And I think it shows, but I've actually managed to get up in front of a room full of strangers and read poetry. Whereas before, I couldn't get up in front of a room full of people I knew and say, "Hi, how are you?" So if I struggle from struggling to speak to family members because I'm too socially anxious to, to standing up in front of a room full of strangers to read poetry, I'm making progress. And it may not sound like big progress to some people, but to me it's massive progress. And I think learning that I'm autistic and learning about autism, what my autism is, and learning who I am and what autism means to me and all that jazz has helped me achieve those goals, has helped me make that progress. So that's how massive an autism diagnosis will be. If I've managed to accomplish that, just having it confirmed, imagine what it will be like when I finally get assessed and diagnosed. Can't wait for that day. So I'm going to end this video with talking about the label. People on about this labelling thing. Mainly parents, this whole thing of I don't want to label my child with something like autism because it will affect them later on in life when getting jobs and being successful. Chuck that in the bin, screw it up, chuck it in the bin, ignore that. Labelling, this label you're on about is a diagnosis. A diagnosis or label is a key that unlocks doors. This key will give your child access to tools they may need. It will give them access to help and support they may need through school. And it will help them become successful. It will give them access to tools and help they need when they leave school, when they go into a working environment. It will give them the access to the tools and help they need there, those tools will help them become successful. Your child needs to learn coping mechanisms. Your child needs extra time on exams, maybe. Your child needs to have one-to-one learning assistance. So they need one-to-one time with a teacher or a helper teacher. I think they were called S&A teachers. S&A. When I was in school, I don't know what they're called now, but yeah, they need the one-to-one help. They may need, instead of being in a hall with all their other peers during an exam, they may need a room to themselves because of all the sensory input in that exam room. You may not think it, but the sound of pencils writing, the sounds of pens hitting desks, the sound of other students coughing, sniffing, breathing, the sound of the clock on the wall ticking. Us autistic people take all that in, and it's a massive distraction. So just simple little things like that. Having the autism label or diagnosis will help your child have access to things that will help them cope through school, that will help them learn better, because we learn differently as well, us autistic people. Our brains are wired differently. I go for the analogy of the computers. Windows and Mac. Now, they're both computers, but they both have different operating systems. Now, with Windows Word, Microsoft Word, if you want to put that on your Mac, you have to download patches to get it to work with the Mac operating systems. So if we put it in this terminology, where neurotypical, non-autistic people are Windows and autistic people are Mac, and the Windows word processor is knowledge or learning, schooling. If we want to apply that learning, schooling, the Windows Microsoft Word, if we want to apply that to an autistic person, that learning, we need a patch. And we can only get that patch if we have that diagnosis, that key that unlocks the door to give us access to that patch, if any of that makes sense. So yeah, the best thing you can do for your child, your autistic child, is get them that diagnosis as early as possible and ignore all this labelling nonsense, because I myself was not labelled when I was at school, when I was a young kid. And take it from me, it was no good. School, I struggled immensely with. I came out of school, I left school with no qualifications. I failed all my exams because I didn't have the correct help and support I needed. Then I went to college, couldn't do the courses I wanted to do because I didn't have the correct exams or grades or whatever. And then, of course, leaving college, I left college with no qualifications as well. And then when I went to get a job, no one would hire me because no employer would take me seriously, because none of them understood that I was autistic. The teachers at school didn't understand I was autistic. The teachers at college didn't understand that I was autistic. So they never bothered applying any autistic tools to help me learn. So that failed me. If I had been diagnosed autistic as a young child, as a toddler, then school may have panned out differently. I may have got more help and support. I may have completed and passed some of my exams. I may have left school and college with some qualifications, which then would have enabled me to get a job, you know? So yeah, the best thing you can do for your autistic children, get them labelled. Get them that diagnosis. It is important. That is the best thing you can do for them. But yeah, I'm gonna end this video there. I hope it's been helpful. So yeah, thanks for watching. I shall speak to you all later. Bye bye.